Hello, hello. I think it's time that we have another chat. This time, I would like to talk about wheelchair use, um, ambulatory wheelchair use, as well as permanent wheelchair use, and just a little bit of the etiquette that a lot of people don't seem to realize comes with approaching a person who uses a mobility aid. Um, I normally use a crutch to get around. Within my house, I can generally get by without my crutch, but I'm just kind of limping around. But then when I leave my house, I will always have my crutch or a wheelchair. On bad days where the pain is too much, I can't stand up properly, I can't walk properly, I will be using my wheelchair. Um, I have a very cool wheelchair. It's got two sets of wheels. One is regular wheelchair wheels, so it's manual, so you just, move yourself along. And the other one is called emotion, which is a type of kind of propelling wheels. So you give it one little push and it just drives, which is pretty good. Um, what I've noticed being an ambulatory wheelchair user, so someone who uses their wheelchair sometimes, I've noticed that people react in quite bizarre ways when they realize that I can move my legs. Sometimes I'll be in my wheelchair and I'll be wiggling my legs because, ADHD, I'm all over the place. And I can see people staring and they're looking at me like they're moving their legs. Well, why are they in a wheelchair? Sometimes when something isn't quite that accessible, for example, when my girlfriend has to haul my wheelchair into a train that is not adapted for wheelchairs, I just temporarily get out, I use my crutch, I go up the few steps into the train, and she carries the wheelchair in. The looks on people's faces when I stand up out of my wheelchair, it's as if they've seen some sort of miracle. They're baffled. Um, which is why I think it's important to spread some awareness around the topic of ambulatory wheelchair users. Because not every person who's in a wheelchair is permanently in the wheelchair. A lot of people use wheelchairs because they have conditions that have flare ups that go up and down a bit, like what I have, ankylosing spondylitis. Um, People with chronic fatigue syndrome might use a wheelchair. People with different types of arthritis or multiple sclerosis, or there's an endless list of conditions that might make somebody use a wheelchair sometime, but not all the time. Um, so as far as the way that you treat a person in a wheelchair goes, don't assume that they can't do things. Don't assume that their mental age is less than the age that you see on the person in front of you. Don't go and stand over them. Talk to the person who's with them, and don't talk to the person who's in the wheelchair. It's happened to me a lot when I'm somewhere with my partner that somebody will start talking to her right over my head, completely ignoring me because they assume that she speaks for them. That's my dog guarding the house from the mailman, I think. They assume that she speaks for me because she's the one that's walking and mobile and I'm the one that's in the wheelchair. Sometimes they will end up speaking to me as if I'm a child. One time I was at the zoo and I was looking at the snake exhibit, and this lady came over and she was like, "Do you see the little snaky? Have you found it yet? Do you know how to find the little snaky?" And I was quite baffled. I mean, I look young. I don't think I look sufficiently young for people to talk to me like that. So I kind of looked at her and I was like, yes, thank you. I found the snake already. And then she realized that she'd made an assumption about me because I was just sitting there looking at the snake exhibit. And then she apologized and quickly walked away. But it was very uncomfortable for both of us. Um, so if you see a person who's in a wheelchair, don't assume that they can't do things. Don't assume that they can be spoken to like a child. And don't assume that you can touch their wheelchair, which is the last point I wanted to make. When I use a mobility aid, that mobility aid essentially becomes an extension of me. I need it, right? I need it to be able to move, to be able to get around. So when somebody doesn't ask if they can help and they just kind of grab the handles of my wheelchair to help me up a curb or something like that, it's extremely uncomfortable. You really you need to realize that the wheelchair is an extension of the person at that point. It's how they get around, it's their freedom. So if somebody grabs the handles of your wheelchair that you're sitting in, you lose control of your own mobility, essentially, and it's extremely uncomfortable. So I always ask people not to touch my wheelchair. I always tell people, you need to ask. You can offer your help. That's very kind of you. Please go up to, if you see a person in a wheelchair struggling to go up a curb, please go up to them and say, excuse me, sir, ma'am, person, can I help you? And if they say yes, then by all means, help them up. But they might say no, because you know what? Maybe they're trying to practice going up the curbs so that they have more independence. I've been struggling with curbs and things, and then trying to figure out how to do it myself because I want to feel free and able to move around in my wheelchair. So you don't know what they're doing. You don't know if they need help, if they want help, if they're stuck, if they're just practicing, or anything else that they might be doing. So to sum it all up, some people use wheelchairs but aren't permanently in the wheelchair, right? They're ambulatory wheelchair users. Some people use their wheelchair sometimes, and other times they can walk normally. Other times they use a crutch or another mobility aid like a walker. It varies. People's chronic conditions are not the same every single day a lot of the time. Mine wildly varies. I have really good days, really bad days, and everything in between. And then don't speak down at people who are in a wheelchair. Don't speak over their head to the person that they're with. And don't grab their mobility aid. It's inappropriate. You wouldn't grab a blind person's seeing cane that they use to see where things are. You wouldn't grab that. You wouldn't grab the crutch that someone's holding in their hand. So don't grab a wheelchair. Okay? Well, I hope that this was a little bit informative, and from the perspective of someone who uses a wheelchair sometimes, I hope that it's helpful to some of you to understand better what it's like to be in that situation and what not to do. So have a good one.